series, and it was called Unlikely Used. So this will be, I guess, another portion of that, and use what you got. Now I think about how many times we do not do something in our lives because we feel like that we don't have the talent or the right tools to do it. I know a lot of people who have wanted to pursue things in their life, personal endeavors and dreams and things that they had hoped to accomplish, but they never were willing to really go into it because they didn't feel like they were properly equipped to do it. The same thing happens to us a lot of times when we feel like that maybe God's trying to lead us into something. A lot of times we feel like we're not properly equipped to do it, so we don't really respond in the way that we should. I personally can think of countless times that I've passed up chances to do things because I just didn't feel like I was properly equipped to do it. And that's both in things that I had hoped to pursue in my personal life and also things that I feel like that God was leading me to do, but I just felt like that I wasn't the right person to do it. And that's, we make those mistakes and thinking that we know better than God sometimes. You may or may not be familiar with a man by the name of Muggsy Bogues. I know that's a strange name or a funny name or whatever. Muggsy Bogues is an NBA basketball player for many years, but he was raised by a single mother in the Lafayette Court housing projects in Baltimore. Muggsy he went to high school at Dunbar High School in Baltimore and was very successful there. As a matter of fact, his last 2 years, I think they were 59-0, number one ranked team in the entire country in high school. And there were a couple other guys on that team that were really good and ended up being pro ball players too. After high school, Bogues went to Wake Forest and played 4 years there. When he left there, he was a statistical leader in many of the significant statistics in basketball for Wake Forest. And after college, he was drafted by the Washington Bullets. And about a year later, he was traded to the Charlotte Hornets, where he played for 10 years. And then a couple other teams later, and he retired in 2001. All of this, though, is significant because Muggsy Bogues was only 5 feet 3 inches tall. And since his retirement and before his retirement in 2001, he's the shortest player that's ever played on an NBA team. The reason I shared all that with you about Muggsy Bogues is because he didn't let his lack of height stop him from playing in a sport that's dominated by people who are, 6'8", 6'9", 7 foot. He didn't let it deter him from being able to accomplish those things that he knew he could do. He was an interesting player. I don't know if you're a basketball fan or not, but Muggsy Bogues was always fun to watch. When he stepped on the court, it was obvious that one of these things was not like the others. I mean, he was just, he was a very small man compared to the rest of the people on the court. But he walked with a swagger about him, and he had a confidence about him that he didn't care that he wasn't equipped the same way that the other guys were. He even one time, and I remember this actually, but he blocked Patrick Ewing's shot, and Patrick Ewing's 7 foot tall. And he came from behind and did it, but nonetheless, he blocked his shot, and that's, at 5'3", you wouldn't think he could even reach the top of Patrick Ewing's head. But he managed to jump up there and block his shot. It's pretty cool. But what he didn't have was height. What he did have was speed and an amazing ability to pass the ball. He could find people on the court that most people wouldn't think were open, and he could get the ball to them. And so he was very useful and very significant to his team because of that. But here's the thing is, rather than focus on the things that he didn't have, he focused on what he did have, and he used that to the best of his ability. What happens to us so often is that we do just the opposite. We don't focus on the things that we do have, we focus on the things that we don't. And we allow that to hinder us from accomplishing what we can, both here and through the spiritual means that God has laid out for us. So we're in the book of Judges, chapter 3, verse 31. It's the very last verse. Judges 3, verse 31. You found your place, say God is good? All the time. God is good. Amen. Judges 3:31. I'm going to read one verse. That's it. After him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, who killed 600 men of the Philistines with an ox goad, and he also delivered Israel. He killed 600 men with an ox goad. So there's a lot of interesting facts about Shamgar that make him very unlikely to have accomplished such a feat. The first one is in the book of Judges. We know that these are people that God called on to judge and to, not necessarily to rule, but to judge over Israel for periods of time. And there several judges are listed in the book of Judges, and probably I guess the most famous or most well known would be Samson. We know was called on to judge Israel. But the significant thing about Shamgar is that he was not likely an Israelite. Shamgar is not an Israeli name, and there's no record of his father, Anath, being an Israeli. So God took this person who was not even an Israelite and used them to accomplish what needed to be done to eliminate and protect Israel at the time. Secondly, he was not a warrior. Shamgar was a farmer. He had no formal training in combat, not so ever. I mean, he hadn't gone to a military camp or anything like that and been trained to fight. He was simply a farmer. There's not a great deal of information about him, but the biggest thing that lets us know that he was a farmer is the tool that he used to accomplish this mission. And we'll look at that a little bit more in just a minute. But I'm probably going to drink a little more than usual today, guys. My throat's been a little jacked up, but it's all good. We'll get through it. But lastly, he didn't have a weapon that was engineered for victory in combat. It wasn't like he was out there, fighting with military-style weapons. And, in today's time, we had a great deal more weapons than they did back then. But Shamgar didn't even have the weapons used in combat for that day and time. He wasn't out there roaming around looking for battles. When God called on him, the man was simply doing what he knew how to do. He was farming. He wasn't called out of a military camp to step up and be a great leader. But he called him to judge Israel for a short time, and he did his job the best way he knew how with what he had to do the job with. Guys, sometimes we think we can't do anything for God because we believe we've got to be something we're not. If you think that you've got to be the perfect Christian that knows how to wear the right clothes, use the right language, carry the right Bible, know the right verses and all that, you're completely wrong. God don't expect you to be like the cream of the crop. Nobody is esteemed any higher than the other in God's eyes. We're all as sorry as they come. But nonetheless, he can take our sorry selves and make us into something that's useful for him, and we need to understand that. We have to stop trying to limit what God can do through us because we think that we know better than he does. When God is trying to persuade us to do something and laying that conviction on our heart, we just need to simply be submissive to it. It's hard for us to do because we think we got to do things in our own power. And we think that our own power is not good enough to accomplish that goal. And that's where we fail so often. But in this case, God called Shamgar. Shamgar said, okay, I'll go do it. He said, I'm going to do the best I can with what I got. And what he had was the tool and a talent for farming. Obviously, we know most farm boys are pretty tough, and we call them farm strong or whatever. They're pretty strong. So he went in and he did his thing. He was tough. He worked hard. He knew how to work hard, so he was willing to go and do what God was sending him to do without complaining about what he didn't have. He didn't tell God that he couldn't do it because he didn't have the appropriate training or the necessary weapons. He just says, kind of like Isaiah, when God said, who will we send? Isaiah said, here I am, Lord, send me. Every now and then we need to have that here I am, Lord, send me mentality. And it's hard for a person to challenge you to do that, but I want to challenge us to do that. I want us to be willing to be that person. It may be something as simple as God may be laying it on your heart to invite somebody to church. But for whatever reason, you don't feel like you got the right words to invite them. The right words are this: hey, you want to come to church? It ain't that hard, man. The thing is the willingness to do it. That's it. The willingness to do it. Here's the thing. He used an ox goad to accomplish the task that God had led him to do. I don't know how familiar you are with what an ox goad is, but I'll tell you it's a stick that's got a sharp, pointy end on one end, like that. And a lot of times they would put a metal sleeve over it to make it sharper, okay? The other end had that long, curved blade. That blade was not intended in any way, shape, or form to be a weapon. That blade was used to clean the plows, okay? The pointy end was meant to prod and to direct the ox. When you had a team of ox out there and they were going a certain way, they would take this thing and poke it. And they were usually about 8 to 10 feet long. So they could reach out there. I guess it's a safe way to poke one without getting kicked in the teeth. But nonetheless, they would use these things just to steer the ox in the direction that they wanted to go and to get them to, I guess, comply with what they needed them to do. But here's the thing. That was all he had. That was it. He had no armor. He had no shield. He had no real skill of fighting. He was simply a farmer that had an ox goad and was willing to go and do what God asked him to do. Listen, a lot of times, guys, we can accomplish a lot more with a willingness to do what we're being convicted to do than we can with any talent that we have or any tool that we have. But we look for so many reasons not to do it. Over and over again, I've seen people push against what God's trying to get them to do. I know personally what that's like because I pushed against God calling me to preach. When you live the life that I've lived and you've gone through some of the things that I've gone through and you've done some of the things that I've done, when God's calling you to preach, you are quick to tell him he's got the wrong guy. I'm just telling you. I hadn't always been the best person. I hadn't always used the best language. I hadn't always used the best judgment. I haven't always cared about people. I cared about me a whole lot for a long time. And so when things led to the direction that they led, when I finally submitted my life to Christ, I still didn't have any intentions of preaching. I just wanted to live a life closer to Christ. The next thing I know, all the pieces start coming. And I start feeling these convictions, and I start being asked to teach and things like this on Wednesday nights. And people invite me to come and teach their Sunday school and things. And it got to the point I said, I don't think I want to do this, So when people would call me, I'd say, no, I can't. I can't. I didn't have any reason why I couldn't other than I can't. I can't make it. Sorry, maybe next time type thing. And I mean, as things progressed, it seemed like it was more and more, and the burden got heavier and heavier, and I pushed harder and harder away from it. And I told God, they're not going to listen to me. People are not going to listen to me. People know me around here. I mean, you're going to have to move me to like Kansas and let me start all over when nobody knows me, I mean, that's the mentality I had. There is no way that people know me who have been around me and have heard my foul mouth and seen the sorry, heinous things that I've done. There was no compassion in my life other than just being self-driven. Nobody is going to listen to anything I have to say. And God spoke to me as clear, and it wasn't audible, but I just felt like he said, look, it ain't about what you got to say. And I reached that point to where he just spoke to my heart on that. It's not about what you got to say. And then from there, through prayer and the fear of running from him any more than I did, things come together, and here I am. And here y'all are. Bless y'all's heart. But nonetheless, the point is you got, sometimes we push on it and we push on it. There needs to be a point where we reach when we say, okay, God, I'm going to do it. I don't feel like I'm equipped to do it. Guys, I've never been to Bible college. Never been to seminary or anything like that. Never. I spend my own time in here, but I'm not that smart. Y'all know that, especially ones who've been around me for a while know that. But God opens it up and shows it to me, and I praise Him for that. But nonetheless, the point is we just need to be willing. He'll take care of all the rest. We just need to be a willing vessel. We need to realize that God don't make mistakes, guys. It's not like He put the wrong person in the job and then He's like, oh, goodness, I better get him out of there. It ain't like that. He don't make mistakes, and He don't put us in positions that He's not ready to use us in. We may not be ready, or we may feel like we're not ready, but when He puts us there, He knows the next step. You know what's cool about tomorrow is He's already been there. That's what's cool about it. So no matter how much we feel like we can't accomplish whatever it is, we go into tomorrow, if we go into it prepared, it's cool because He's already been there. He's already paved the way. He knows what's happening next. And He knows how we can be used to accomplish what He needs. Our usefulness to God is usually, or non-usefulness to God, is usually only limited by our willingness or non-willingness to be obedient to His calling. And His calling doesn't mean, guys, we all have a calling. You gotta understand that. Not only, it's not just a preacher that's called, it's not just the music leader, the Sunday school teachers, whatever. We all have a calling in our lives through Jesus Christ to be obedient. We all have a calling to reach out to people and listen, your calling may simply be just to let people see Christ through your life. It may be that simple. It's the things that you see on the church signs sometimes. It says, you may be the only Bible that some people ever read. Well, if that's the case, that's your calling. It's okay. Your calling don't have to be great and magnificent. Now, I'm not Billy Graham and likely never going to be anything like Billy Graham, and I'm okay with that. I don't have to be at the podium that sees millions of people come and give their lives to Christ. Would I like that? Would be awesome, right? But look, God has blessed me with seeing a few people give their life to Christ, and that is fine with me. That is fine with me. That tickles me to death. If I never preach to more people than what's sitting right here, I'm okay with that. That don't bother me because it's His will. It's where He wants me, and that's all that matters. I don't need the spotlight about anything. I don't like being acknowledged for anything. I'll be honest with you. I had folks last week. We had that Friends and Family Day, and I had some folks come up and they said, you did a great job on that. And it's hard for me to hear that because it's not about me. I don't want to seem disrespectful or unappreciative of the compliment, but at the same time, I just want to say to God be the glory. Because it's God's doing, not mine. If I start putting myself in this, it's no good. My illustrations, I'll probably put myself, because I do the thing, I use illustrations that I'm familiar with. Obviously, y'all know I'm a basketball nut, so I use a lot of sports and basketball illustrations, combat illustrations, things that interest me. I don't do that to draw attention to me. That's just what I know, so that's how I know how to relate to it. But anyway, just need to make ourselves available for His calling. And throughout the Bible, though, we see that God uses people who are, by, human standards, grossly underqualified to do what it is that He's calling them to do. There was an old preacher that used to travel around out in the area where I live and evangelize a lot out in Washington County, Virginia. I never got to meet him. This was before my time. And I can't even remember what his name is, but I've heard a lot of the older preachers out there talk about him. And here's the thing. This brother couldn't read. He could not read, but he knew this word. And he would stand up. They said he would hold his Bible while he was preaching and never open it. It didn't do him any good to open it. He couldn't read what was in it. But he would hold it and never open it and preach. And through his obedience, God allowed so many people to come to salvation through this area, or through the area out in, the Benhams and that community out through there. And this brother couldn't even read. But he didn't allow that to keep him from being able to do what God was calling him to do. He didn't say, I can't do it, God. I don't have the tools to do it. I don't even know how to read your word. You know what he did is he listened to his word and he prayed, and God put that word in his heart, and he had the message to deliver that people needed to hear to come to salvation. Guys, it just takes a little bit of obedience. You don't know what you can accomplish for God until you're willing to do what God is pushing you to do. So I hope to help you realize that God will likely put you in a position to be a blessing for his sake at some point or another. But you got to remember, it's for his sake, not for yours. So you don't need to constantly think about reasons why you can't do it. I've been around so many people that have seen the other side of me, is what I'm trying to tell you guys. And yet I still have people who come and are willing to listen to what I say, even knowing what I did back then. Because they know, I guess, or maybe it's something that they know that I guess only God could do that. I mean, that's the only explanation I have for it. It's the only explanation I have for people who have known me in the past that are willing to come and listen when I preach the word that God has given me. It's only because they know that only God could do that. Anyway, here's the things. It may not be something that changes the world. It may not even be something that changes your community. However, okay, it may be something that brings honor and glory to his name. And that's the significance of everything, guys. That's what matters. So the next time you're approached with an opportunity to do something and you feel like you can't or whatever, but it's something that you can do for the Lord, don't be so quick to turn it down because you feel underqualified or unequipped to do the job. Don't be so quick. Guys, I've asked some of you guys to do things, and I see an instant fear come across. I mean, it's that deer in the headlights. Well, I can't, I don't, it's not, I don't ask you that because I want to put you on the spot. I don't think it's an accident do I come to certain people and ask them for things. I believe that you're the person that God led me to bring it up to. Now, I don't say that to pressure you into doing anything. I just say that to be prayerful about it. Don't just instantly say no. Just say, let me pray on it. And don't just say it and then don't go do it. Because I'm going to come back. But anyway, take what you have and give it to God and ask him to let you be used for his glory. It's just that simple. Ask him to let you be used for his glory. Look how many excuses Moses made when God called him to do a work. He came to him through a burning bush. First of all, if you talk to me, if a burning bush is talking to me, okay, here's your sign. This is pretty significant, all right? But he came to him, and Moses made every excuse that he could think of, right? He told God that the Egyptians wouldn't listen to him. He told him he couldn't speak well and all these things. And God said, hey, what's that in your hand? He said, it's a staff. He said, throw it on the ground. He threw it on the ground, turned it into a snake. Okay? A couple other things happened. Then he says, pick it up by the tail. He picked it up by the tail, turned back into a staff, right? That's pretty awesome. God will do things like that to show you. But here's what's really cool is Exodus 4:20. It says this, then Moses took his wife and his sons and set them on a donkey and returned to the land of Egypt. Pay attention here. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand. See, it went from just being a staff to the rod of God. How did that happen? He put it in God's hands. Guys, whatever your talent may seem like that big, or your ability to do anything may seem that big, but put it in God's hands, man, and it could change everything. You just never know. We can't limit what God can do. We can try. We can tell him, oh, I can't do that, Lord. You can't use me to do that because I'm not capable. But what God can do is nothing that we can even comprehend. So let's stop making excuses why we can't do something for the Lord and start using what we have to get the job done. Don't be waiting on that perfect scenario to where all of a sudden you develop a talent or where somebody automatically lays that tool in your lap that you need to accomplish it. Let's just take what we have and be willing and obedient to God and see what happens with it. You never know. There's people out here right now that have written books that don't even have a high school education, And those books have impacted people's lives and gone out through all over the place. You know, there's a cop that wrote a devotion. I got to get my hands on this thing. I met the guy in the beach. His son actually is the one that wrote it. But it's touched. It floats around law enforcement communities everywhere. It's a devotion for cops. And he wrote this thing, and he said, I forget how many thousands of these things have been sent out. Just sent out everywhere. And this guy is nothing. He's not, again, he's never been to seminary. He's never anything like that. God called him to be the chaplain of that department, and then called him to preach, and then called him to write this devotion. Pretty awesome. So be bold enough to pray and ask God exactly what he would have you to do for his glory. And that takes boldness to do that. Because when you pray and you earnestly mean that, and you say, God, please, just use me for your glory. What can I do? What is it that you have for me that will bring you honor and glory? Use me and let me be obedient to that. You never know what's going to happen. He may use you in ways that you never saw coming. Bow your head and close your eyes. Here's the thing.